A federal judge in Delaware dismissed 2 misdemeanor tax charges against Hunter Biden. The president's son allegedly failed to pay taxes on time in 2017 and 2018. The charges were part of his now-defunct plea deal. They were dropped at the request of special counsel David Weiss. Closing the book on that case enables him to pursue new charges in California or Washington, D.C. IRS whistleblowers told Congress they recommend charging the president's son with 6 felonies, including tax evasion and filing false tax returns. The tax case against Biden is separate from felony gun possession charges he's also facing. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has requested that now-defunct Manhattan Metropolitan Correctional Center be used to house migrants. It's part effort to deal with the city's influx of illegal immigrants. A lawyer from Mayor Adams listed various sites in a letter to New York Governor Kathy Hochul. The letter requested permission from the federal government to utilize closed correctional facilities amid severe overcrowding in city-run shelters. The Manhattan jail was closed down in 2021. That followed years of complaints over unsafe conditions, including sewage, floods, vermin infestations, COVID outbreaks, as well as security breaches. The Federal Bureau of Prisons said yesterday it could not comment on any discussion about the Manhattan jail. A spokeswoman for the mayor also had no comment. Presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy publicizing what he calls his 10 truths. They revolve around the importance of God, family, and country. Let's take a look.
Presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is sharing his 10 truths. Ramaswamy took to X, formerly known as Twitter, where the list begins with God is real, and there are 2 genders. Some other notable ones are an open border is no border. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind, and capitalism lifts people up from poverty. He posted the list after speaking at an event in California. At the event, Ramaswamy spoke about his past and how he became successful in the U.S.
My parents came to this country 40 years ago with no money. In a single generation, I have gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies and did it while marrying my wife, Apurva, and raising our 2 sons.
However, he went on to say that he's worried that this American dream will not exist for his sons and their generation because the country is experiencing a national identity crisis. He says that's because traditional ideals have disappeared and have been replaced by secular religions in America.
Wokeism, transgenderism, climatism, COVIDism, globalism, depression, anxiety, fentanyl, suicide. These are symptoms of a deeper void of purpose and meaning in our country.
He went on to say what the traditional values are that the U.S. lost, which could bring back meaning to people's lives.
Faith, patriotism, belief in God, nation, the things we talked about. When those have disappeared, that leaves a moral vacuum in its wake.
Ramaswamy made the comments just days before his first Republican primary debate. The debate is set to be held on Wednesday in Milwaukee.
Tourists visit or stay away from Hawaii in the wake of the devastating Lahaina wildfires. We have more on how locals and tourists feel in the aftermath of the tragedy.
The sight of tourists enjoying Maui's tropical beaches is a sharp contrast to the reality for the rest of the island. Search and rescue teams are still looking for casualties following the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century. Some residents are outraged. Canadian tourist Don Bucky and his wife experienced the tension firsthand.
We were out for dinner and my wife went out to use the washroom, and there was a person out there who was upset that tourists were still here and just, wondering why we were still here.
Tourist Stan Levitsky says authorities are sending mixed messages.
It feels like the governor is waffling, to be honest. First they said no travel, now they're saying, well, part of the island, it's okay, right? And tomorrow it'll be some other story.
At Kihei Cafe, business is slow.
This Kihei Cafe is one of the most popular breakfast places in this town. Usually it would be like line up on at least 10 to 11 people, or even longer. But right now, if you look around, it's just empty.
Chef Courtney Walter is currently making meal boxes for fire survivors. The caterer says the initial anger came from a place of panic.
So people freaked out, I think, and we're like, we can't have people here. And I think that's how I felt too. We're like, we can't have tourists here right now. We need to feed and take care of our own people.
But there's a flip side as well.
But no, us here in Kihei and Wailea and a lot of places in Kula, Makawao, Paia, Haiku, those places are still running. And all those people still have their bills to pay, and they're single parents, and they have mortgages, and they own businesses.
According to Hawaii's Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, the island welcomed more than 9.2 million visitors in 2022. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Brandon Weichert, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
Brandon, what are the implications of paying ransom money to Iran for these hostages?
Well, it's basically feeding the tiger or the crocodile, hoping that it'll eat you last. Rest assured that that money will not be used for humanitarian purposes, despite what the White House is assuring us.
And what do you think the money will be used for? Iran has been called the world's leading state sponsor of terror.
It's exactly right. That's what it's going to be used for. It'll be used for funding Hezbollah and Hamas in their ongoing war against Israel. It'll be used to build greater and more accurate precision-guided missiles, longer range, as well as expanding their nuclear weapons program, all of which threaten us.
Now, the White House announced this deal while Congress is in recess, and Richard Goldberg of the Dispatch argues this is to avoid having to notify Congress. What's your take?
I think Richard Goldberg is completely correct. This whole thing smells. It's a terrible deal, and we're only feeding the beast that is the mad mullahs. And it's part, I think, of a larger move by the Biden administration to ultimately get a nuclear deal with Iran like what Obama had and that Trump had killed.
And just refresh our audiences about what that deal was.
Yeah, basically, we would step aside and let Iran not only have a clear path to nuclear weapons, but we would also integrate Iran into the world economy and political order the way that Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter did ultimately with China. And we all know how that ended up with China. Imagine now the crazy regime of Iran being given the same treatment. Not good for us.
And so how does the Biden administration's approach to freeing American hostages in Iran compare to that of previous administrations?
Well, the Biden administration's approach to freeing Iranian hostages is they're doing this very surreptitiously. At least previous administrations have been very open about the fact they were doing it. The Biden administration is doing it through third parties, and whenever it comes up, they're lying to us about what the money will be used for. Of course, it's not going to be used for humanitarian purposes, whatever that means. It's going to be used to build up the Iranian war machine, which is directly pointed against the United States. So we're basically fueling their war machine under the pretext of we're getting 5 or 6 people back, which is good, but unfortunately, I don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, and now critics have said that a deal like this could promote future hostage-taking and increased ransom money. What's your take on their perspective?
I think they're 100% correct again. I think that it used to be a hallmark of our country's foreign policy that we do not negotiate with terrorists as official policy. And whether we like to admit it or not, whether the Biden administration thinks it's this or not, the Iranian regime currently is a terrorist organization masquerading as a state. And therefore, we have no business doing anything with them that would give them more money and more leverage. And they absolutely will do this again and become even worse abusers of the hostage-taking strategy because they know they'll get something from this current administration.
How do you think these kinds of situations should be handled?
I don't think there should be any negotiation. I think that the threat of military force should always be on the table for these kinds of situations. I understand people don't want to be involved in the Middle East militarily anymore. I don't either. But when an enemy regime like Iran takes our people hostage, we are not going to negotiate. We have the right to attack.
All right, Brandon Weichert, thank you again.
Thank you.
Back to the news. A Minnesota lawmaker has weighed in on a small town's entire police force resigning. She says it serves as a warning for the entire country. The town of Goodhue, Minnesota has a population of 1,300 and a police force of 2 full-time and 5 part-time officers. The entire police force resigned last week, citing compensation as the reason. Minnesota Representative Pam Altendorf told Fox News it reflects a police shortage that exists statewide. She says the crisis began during the 2020 George Floyd riots. She says the shortage hurts small-town police forces because officers can be lured away to bigger cities that can afford to pay more. Altendorf says low morale is another cause of the shortage. She says the source of the issue goes all the way to the top leadership in the state. She pointed to the Defund the Police movement. 2 brothers discover traditional Chinese culture through dance. They grew up in the West but have a profound understanding of this ancient art form. They're both professional dancers participating in the NTD International Classical Chinese Dance Competition this September. Let's hear how they grasped the essence of traditional Chinese culture. At just 18 years old, Lucas Browdy earned the gold medal at the NTD International Classical Chinese Dance Competition 2 years ago.
I feel like with classical Chinese dance is a bit different because behind it there's so much, 5,000 years of culture, right? And then hidden in between the dance there's like all these virtues, all these concepts, all this morality is actually being displayed through dancing.
Lucas Browdy and his brother Jesse Browdy were drawn to classical Chinese dance and joined Shenyun Performing Arts, a leader in this ancient art form.
I've been watching Shenyun since I was a kid, right? But this was the first time that I kind of actually understood the dances, especially the story ones. I almost cried a couple times that night. And I remember going home that night and I wanted to be a Shenyun dancer.
While other kids were enjoying their youth, these 2 brothers were dedicated to honing their dance skills. They faced their own distinct challenges along the way.
Naturally, my limbs are a bit longer and I'm a bit weaker than everyone else. And also maybe I'm a bit tighter in places that you're supposed to be relaxed. And so it's harder for me to perform the jumping techniques and like flipping and stuff. So for me, my big problem would be I have to put in the extra 200% to build my strength in order to be able to achieve these tentacle like jumps and flips. Although the path of dance isn't very easy, but I think going through it will make you a much stronger person in the heart.
There's so many principles of ancient Chinese culture that go into the dance. And so at first I did struggle with this growing up in the West, but I guess it's a matter of how well you grasp the culture, how much you want to grasp the culture in a way. Sometimes you feel like you go through like long periods of time without making much progress. You don't see any hope, I guess, to put it in an extreme way. I guess a lot of the times I kind of just have to sit myself down with like a friend or my brother or something like that, and then we just kind of talk about why we're here, what we're doing this for. Like, we're not just here to dance, we're not just here to, practice this art form, but we're also we have a greater purpose. We're trying to spread this culture to the people of the world and tell the truth of what's happening in China, the persecution and stuff like that.
Through the day-to-day grind of training, the 2 brothers overcame their inner anxieties and pushed beyond their physical limits. In turn, they live full, rewarding lives.
First, through the dance training, I think it taught me diligence, perseverance, and to be positive. Those few lessons, it built into me pretty strongly, and I'm pretty grateful for that.
Ancient Chinese culture is definitely and divinely inspired culture, right? And then when you believe that there's this sort of higher being that's bestowing these gifts upon you, it kind of humbles you in a way. It humbles you a lot, actually, because you know that everything that I have, everything that basically I stand for is given to me almost. Sort of like in the Renaissance, like all of the paintings and sculptures, they're all glorifying the divine.
The two brothers won gold and silver in the 2021 NTD International Classical Chinese Dance Competition. This year, the competition will take place in early September at Purchase College in New York State. Lucas and Jesse encourage dancers from around the world to participate.
Through the competition, you improve a lot because you're practicing techniques, you're practicing movements, and then you're stringing them together in like a 2-minute technique piece, and you're doing it over and over and over again. And so your strength, your dancing, your stamina will all improve greatly. And then through the story dance, your acting, your 表现力, I guess, will improve a lot.
We portray these really amazing stories filled, jam-packed with lessons and morals. By joining this competition, I feel like you improve a lot as a person. I'm very honored to be able to compete with all these people, these great people. We'll improve together, go through much together, and we'll go through strong. So